What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to celebrate the 50th anniversary of The Bad News Bears, which was released on April 7th, 1976, and I've got the Blu-ray right here. But the movie was directed by Michael Ritchie and stars Walter Matthau, Tatum O'Neal, and Jackie Earle Haley. And in my opinion, The Bad News Bears is one of the best movies about sports ever made, and a strong contender for the best movie, period, when it comes to flicks that feature primarily a cast of child actors.
My dad's been a Yankee fan all his life, and he never heard no Buttermaker who ever played for the Yankees, let alone pitched a no-hitter.
All right, I don't know who the hell you are, but sit down and shut up.
And when I watch it now, it really feels like this perfect snapshot or this time capsule of America at that time. Although I must admit, I was not born until a few months after its release. But it's one of those quintessential movies where people say, they don't make them like that anymore. But I'll add, they should.
Academy Award winner Walter Matthau is the coach. Academy Award winner Tatum O'Neal is his secret weapon. Together, they turned the Bad News Bears into a team of superstars you will never forget.
Because for my money, this kid's movie about baseball has more heart, more grit, more humor, more honesty and authenticity than just about any movie geared toward adults that you'll see in the 2020s. But let me amend what I just said. It's not a kid's movie. It's about kids. And for me, there's a subtle distinction. Like when I was 10 years old, Stand By Me came out. That was a movie about kids, but it's not a kid's movie, although the cool kids back in the day were absolutely on its wavelength. And I'm sure the same was true with The Bad News Bears back in 1976. A movie which on the surface can be really deceiving because it appears to be a movie geared toward a very young sensibility, a movie made for little squirts. So much so that when I first saw the heavily censored cut on TV 1,000 years ago, I totally wrote it off. And speaking of censorship, there are clips in this movie where the dialogue is so frank and so candid that it just might get my channel terminated on YouTube, so I'll be selecting my clips very carefully. But little Tanner, he probably needed to have his mouth washed out with soap after making this movie. But in his defense, he at least appears to hate everybody equally. But another reason I ignored this movie as a kid was because so many of the characters, like Tanner, reminded me of kids that I knew at school who just took sports a tad too seriously.
Well, how was I supposed to know? You made sure the big deal yelling after them.
Diversionary tactic, Engelberg. Now get the ball.
Why are you always picking on me? What did I do to you?
Engelberg, quit your crummy bellyache and throw the ball to first base!
But I should acknowledge that when it comes to my own athletic career or lack thereof, when I was a little kid, I just might have been the worst athlete that this country ever produced. And I played a little softball at camp, and I was on the baseball team in middle school, but I basically backdoored my way into liking baseball because I liked collectibles. I liked baseball cards. When I went away to camp when I was like 11 or 12, I had a roommate who was obsessed with baseball cards. I was like, oh, that's kind of like collecting comics. And so I got really into collecting baseball cards in the late 80s with Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco and all those guys that were big at that time. But to be honest, throughout the 80s and 90s, I was just a fucking nerd. Huge surprise. I was really into my comics. I was into my action figures and D&D and video games. So it was a really tough sell at that time, getting me to watch a movie about sports. So for decades, I just completely, totally ignored the movie. But over time, I kept hearing filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino talking about the movie with such a tone of reverence that I eventually circled back and just fell right in love with it. Now it's one of those movies that I can watch anytime. It's a hangout movie like Dazed and Confused or Rio Bravo or They All Laughed, where the plot almost becomes immaterial and you just want to spend more time with those characters.
Engelberg, Reggie,
What's this?
we're celebrating
Why are we celebrating?
because you should be damn proud of yourself.
I'll drink to that!
School.
And while societal norms might have changed just a little bit in the 50-year interim since this movie came out, I feel like if you're having any trouble with kids in your life, whether you're a teacher or a young parent or an older sibling or whatever the case might be, I feel like the great majority of the behavioral problems can be easily solved by just showing them this movie and giving them some of Walter Matthau's very tough love.
Hey, my uniform's too small.
Shut up.
But speaking of all the kids in this amazing movie, the miracle of this movie is that they don't come across as little brats. Or when they come across as brats, they're like lovable brats as opposed to, insufferable brats. And I feel like one of the fastest ways to ruin a movie is to put a bunch of annoying kids in it. And so I feel like this movie should have been a disaster. But I feel like the reason this movie works is that you have a few child actors that are actually pretty good actors like Tatum O'Neal and Jackie Earle Haley. But the rest of the actors, they feel a little bit amateur, which allows them to feel a little bit more authentic. And I feel like one of the reasons kids come across as so inauthentic in most movies, you have screenwriters writing them as either like precocious little brats or just like, little monsters. So a lot of the blame falls on the shoulders of really terrible screenwriting, because it is tough to write in the voice of a child, when you are no longer a child. But somehow these kids come across as natural as breathing. It's almost like they just turned on the camera and just let them improvise, when the exact opposite was the case.
Well, what do you want to play, Lupus?
Lupus.
He's shy, Coach.
Shy my butt. He's an idiot.
Shut up, Tanner. He's just kind of quiet.
Because writer Bill Lancaster wrote one hell of a screenplay, but more about Bill Lancaster in a bit. But back to the kids, a weird thing happens when I watch this movie where they still feel like older kids, because the first time I saw it, like I said, I saw it in butchered form on TV, probably around like 1980 or 1981, when like all the sequels were getting made and that sort of thing. But because the kids in the movie were older than I was at that time, they still feel older, even though I'm going to be turning 50 years old this summer.
I mean, I'm an old, broken-down, third-rate ball player. I like to drink too much. I like to smoke my cigars without anybody bothering me, including you.
And I don't know enough about the behind the scenes on this movie to fully understand how did they get the kids to come across so naturally in this movie. And I imagine it's a combination of factors, where Tatum O'Neal had just won an Oscar for Paper Moon, so she was probably leading the charge in a lot of ways. Walter Matthau probably had to be a bit of like a camp counselor on the set, as much as he was the leading man in the movie. But I imagine that director Michael Ritchie had a lot to do with this. So let's get into some of the people who were behind this little movie, which was a hit in its day. It grossed $42 million off a budget of $9 million. And I should add that stars Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal very wisely negotiated for a piece of the action. But the movie went on to launch a movie franchise, a TV show, as well as a remake decades later by Richard Linklater. And I love Richard Linklater, but stick with the original. But the director of this movie, who I think deserves a lot of the credit for how well this movie turned out, was Michael Ritchie, a filmmaker I didn't really appreciate until I recorded a podcast about his career with comedy impresario Kevin Marr back on Wrong Reel 391, which I'll link below. But while growing up, I caught a lot of Michael Ritchie's movies, even though I didn't know who he was at the time. But I saw Fletch in the theater, I saw Wildcats in the theater, I think I saw The Golden Child on cable. But until I recorded that podcast with Kevin, I had no idea just how impressive his career really was. But like a lot of directors of his generation, he got to start doing a ton of work in TV, so that when the time came for him to make the switch over to feature films, he was totally ready. And he just went on this insane hot streak. But some of the movies include Downhill Racer with Robert Redford. I mean, for a feature film debut, he was already firing on all cylinders. But then he made Prime Cut. And if you're a fan of those really mean and nasty early 70s movies starring people like Lee Marvin and Gene Hackman, Prime Cut will absolutely blow your mind.
Nip.
There I am. You eat guts.
Yeah. I like them.
But then he reunited with Robert Redford for The Candidate. If you're into movies about politics in the 1970s, definitely check it out. Smile. I don't even really know how to make the pitch for Smile, but let's just say it's one of those genuine cultural oddities that a lot of people have forgotten about, but it's absolutely worth seeing. Obviously, he made The Bad News Bears. He made Semi-Tough, and I recently bought the book for Semi-Tough because I love the movie. But I read yet another sports book earlier this year, Vision Quest, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to read all the bizarre like sports novels of the 1970s, because there was just something in the water in the 1970s when it came to books and movies about sports, whether you're talking about Slapshot or North Dallas 40 or The Bad News Bears or Semi-Tough, where they were just, they were less concerned about being inspirational and much more concerned about being gritty, authentic, and hilarious. So I'm a big fan. And I still have a few remaining blind spots from Michael Ritchie's career, but in the 1980s, he made The Island. He made Fletch.
Yes, very good. I'll have a Bloody Mary and a steak sandwich and a steak sandwich, please.
Very good, sir.
In the list of like quintessential dad comedies, I mean, you could talk about Caddyshack or Vacation and things like that, but Fletch, maybe just because my dad loved Fletch so much and would constantly quote it, I just feel like Fletch is the quintessential dad comedy. But Wildcats isn't quite as good as Bad News Bears, but I saw it in the theater, and the movie ended with a rap, and anyway, it was a big part of my childhood. My siblings and I just absolutely ate it up. The Golden Child might have been the first comedy featuring Eddie Murphy, where I was like, oh, not every Eddie Murphy comedy is going to be as good as like 48 Hours or Trading Places or Beverly Hills Cop, but it was still a big deal when I was a little guy. In any case, Michael Ritchie was not a one-man band of this movie. He recruited some incredible collaborators to help him on this film, like John Alonzo, legendary DP of the 1970s. He had Polly Platt as a production designer, and Polly Platt, while later on she became famous as a producer, like she basically launched Wes Anderson's career after seeing his short film for Bottle Rocket and then giving him the chance to make the feature film of Bottle Rocket. But in the early 70s, she was involved with Peter Bogdanovich, and she was the production designer on movies like The Last Picture Show, but she's the production designer on Bad News Bears, and she brought her A game We have composer Jerry Fielding, and I feel like for sports music, I feel like a lot of the music was just like classical music. In any case, the music in this movie absolutely works. But one of his key collaborators was artist Jack Davis from Mad Magazine, who came on board to do the poster. And it's one of those things where so many movies overlook the importance of having a killer poster for your film. But for a lot of people, that's your first handshake with the movie, whether it's a trailer or a poster. But the marketing is so important. And I feel like the marketing should be a work of art unto itself. And you can't do better than getting Jack Davis. But we had one producer on this film, Stanley R. Jaffe. I feel like these days when you watch a movie, there's 150 different producers doing God knows what. On this film, one producer running the show. But a strong contender for the most important collaborator on this movie is writer Bill Lancaster. And there's a strange bit of connective tissue between this video and yet another anniversary video that I'm working on. Because coming up in a couple days, we also have the 75th anniversary of The Thing from Another World, which John Carpenter would remake as The Thing in 1982. But Bill Lancaster wrote the remake of The Thing, and he also wrote Bad News Bears. And if you look here on his IMDb page, his entire career consists exclusively of credits within these two franchises. We have the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training, the Bad News Bears Go to Japan, the Bad News Bears TV series, The Thing, obviously, The Thing video game, the remake of the Bad News Bears, and The Thing remastered video game. But I feel like if you're going to be known for working in only two franchises throughout your entire career, you could do a lot worse than being affiliated with The Thing and the Bad News Bears. But as I was getting prepared for this video, and I saw that I had these two anniversaries coming up at the same time, I was like, this is just so bizarre that they are falling at the same time. But I'm working on both videos at the same time. I just decided to record this one first. But no matter how incredible Bill Lancaster's screenplay might have been, it would have been a fruitless endeavor if you did not find the right actors to bring these words to the screen. And we got to start with Walter Matthau.
Hey, will you shut up? Right on my punchline here.
One of the most legendary actors of the 20th century. But when I was a little kid or growing up, my first exposure to him was with movies like Grumpy Old Men or Dennis the Menace. So when I was like a young teen, I was like, who's this old fart who's appearing in all these movies? What I did not know was that he'd had a legendary career for decades leading up to that. I think at this point, the earliest movie I've seen him in is the incredible movie A Face in the Crowd from the late 50s. He's one of the early kind of skeptics or cynics of this country bumpkin who's being turned into like a pop star, then a political figure. But A Face in the Crowd is one of the most mesmerizing movies of the 1950s. And Walter Matthau is a big part of why it worked out so well.
Well, for a mild man, you sound vicious.
Didn't you know? All mild men are vicious. They hate themselves for being mild, and they hate the windy extroverts whose violence seems to have a strange attraction for nice girls. Who should know better?
But Walter Matthau, with that classic hangdog expression of his, he's one of those actors who just looks like he was old in every era. Whether you're talking about the 1950s or the 1990s, he pretty much always looks the same. But he had real acting chops. He's one of those guys who could enjoy success on the stage as well as on the screen. And the most obvious example would be The Odd Couple, because he originated the role of Oscar Madison in The Odd Couple on the stage for Neil Simon, and then would do the movie with Jack Lemmon only a few years later.
Yeah, oh, yes, bowling. Bowling is a wonderful exercise, Felix, but that's not the kind of relaxation I had in mind. I mean, the night was made for other things.
Like what?
Like, unless I get to touch something soft in the next 2 weeks, I'm in big trouble.
But for an actor who, I think we fondly remember him as one of the great comedic actors, thanks to movies like, The Bad News Bears or Grumpy Old Men or whatever, in the 70s, he had a really gnarly, kind of gritty Clint Eastwood phase, which I think to the present day, a lot of people still overlook just how much of a badass he was back in the day, working with directors like Don Siegel. But he made these movies like The Laughing Policeman or The Taking of Pelham 123 or Charlie Varick, where it's like, holy shit, I thought you were like the funny guy who does all these like silly movies, when in actuality, you've been Charles Bronson or Lee Marvin or Clint Eastwood all this time. But as an actor, he just contained multitudes. And for a decade that's renowned for these gritty, gnarly, just mean and nasty action movies, he was right there in the mix, competing with anybody that you care to mention. But perhaps his most charming role is in the movie Hopscotch, where he shares some incredible scenes with actress Glenda Jackson.
Oh, where have you been, you old goat? You bastard, I thought I'd never see you again.
Please watch your language. You know how sensitive I am.
So just throw a rock and you'll find an incredible Walter Matthau performance. But when it comes to the Bad News Bears, he just has so many incredible moments. And what's incredible about this movie is his willingness to go to some really, really dark places, in spite of the fact that this movie is a lighthearted kids movie about baseball. But I would argue that some of the scenes that he shares with Tatum O'Neal in this movie are as powerful, if not more so, than any drama that you care to mention in the 2020s, where he's just so vicious. Where I guess I got to talk about Tatum O'Neal and Walter Matthau at the same time. But Tatum O'Neal, she plays a character who's the daughter of a woman that Walter Matthau's character, Buttermaker, dated a few years back. But now he really needs a pitcher for his team, so he recruits her, even though he hasn't seen her in a couple of years after he and her mother split up. But she clearly wants a father figure in her life. And while she might fight tooth and nail about how she wants to take ballet and she wants to be a model and she wants to get braces and she's through with all that dumb baseball, what she really wants is a father figure in her life.
Baseball's not tomboy stuff. It's your country's national pastime. It's healthy. It's a lot healthier than sitting around here on a stupid street corner selling dumb maps to a bunch of ignorant hicks. Look at that gut on you.
And there's a scene in this movie, I'm getting chills even bringing it up. There's a scene in this movie that's so powerful, I almost can't even watch it because the emotions are so raw. But as she and Buttermaker start to become close again, she announces to him one day that she's planning this evening where she and her mom and Buttermaker, they're going to go out to a double feature and dinner, and it's going to be like the old days. And he basically blows her off and just tells her in very blunt terms, like, I didn't want to be around you, but now I need you for the baseball team. And he throws a beer in her face, and she walks off, with her pride and dignity intact, but then the camera comes around and we see that she's bawling, and it's a genuinely heartbreaking moment. But then the camera goes back to Walter Matthau, and we see him sipping on his beer, and he's crying as well, where he's just decided he wants to be a dead-end drunk with no commitments and no career prospects and no real strong family ties. But it's a really dark, honest scene about people who've just decided that they just want to drink all day and smoke cigars and scrape together what money they can here and there, but he has basically given up on life. But as you're watching, you're like, wait a second. Who was the audience for this movie? Are you trying to get little kids to enjoy this great movie about baseball, or is it kind of an all-ages movie? But it just comes out of nowhere, and it's so overwhelmingly strong. Like I said, I have trouble watching the scene because it's just that raw, and it's just that sad, and it's incredible stuff. And I think the scene's all the more powerful because earlier in the movie, it's constantly making fun of the fact that all he does is basically drink and smoke cigars and pass out while he's supposed to be cleaning pools, or pass out while he's supposed to be coaching Little League Baseball. And even Tatum O'Neal points out how years ago he would pass out and she would do his work for him cleaning the pool. And we see it at the beginning of the flick where he's got all the little kids cleaning the pools for him while he's telling them stories about his days in minor league baseball when he was a player down in Florida, as he pronounces it. And when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, everybody in Virginia and North Carolina pronounced Florida. And for whatever reason now, everybody pronounces it Florida, but I enjoy watching movies where somebody pronounces it the correct way. Even though I'm not from Florida and I've got no ties to Florida, I pronounce it Florida.
Tell us about the time you struck out Ted Williams again.
Ted Williams, 1947, Vero Beach, Florida, spring training.
But the way he talks to these kids, anytime they do any bitching of any kind, he just says, shut up.
You got a hell of a future in pools, kid.
Where you been, you crud? It's been an hour.
Where have I been? I've been out getting what you little creeps have been bitching for, uniforms.
Meanwhile, the uniforms come from Chico's bail bonds, which is absolutely hilarious because all the local vendors and all the local businesses, they've already chosen to sponsor a million other teams. So basically, as a last resort, he gets Chico's bail bonds to sponsor the team and create the uniforms. But the arc of his character in this movie is fascinating, where he kind of has these peaks and valleys where it's not just a straight trajectory, because initially he starts out not giving a shit. Then he feels a little guilty, decides to get invested, but then he gets too invested and ends up kind of going psycho. And by the end of the movie, he's finally back in a proper state of equilibrium, where he just wants the kids to have a good time, do their best, and he's looking forward to doing it the next year.
Mr. Buttermaker, I don't know about you, but I want to win, so don't send me in.
Listen, Lupus, you didn't come into this life just to sit around on a dugout bench, did you? Or get your ass out there and do the best you can.
But there's a great moment early on where there's a turning point where the character Ahmad Abdul Rahim, played by Aaron Blunt, he gets upset that he's been playing so poorly, and he basically rips off his uniform and goes and hides in a tree. And Buttermaker has to go up and kind of talk him down from the tree and explain to him how even his hero Hank Aaron struggled in some early days. But the line that Ahmad Abdul Rahim says to him about don't give me that honky bullshit. I mean, Jesus Christ, once again. The dialogue in this movie is very blunt.
Yeah, they were tough chances. The sun was in your eyes.
Don't give me any of your hunky bullshit, Buttermaker. I know they were easy.
Let's not bring race into this, Ahmed. We got enough problems as it is.
But I love the turning point in this movie where Buttermaker's confronted by the team and they say they've put it to a vote. They're gonna go through a democratic process, and they've decided to disband the team because they're getting too much abuse at school. And Tanner's constantly getting in fights. And I love how Tanner's so defiant, and he basically says like, I want to play ball coach. But it's a great character beat for Tanner as well.
Took on the whole 7th grade. You want to quit, Tanner?
God, no, I want to play ball.
But when Buttermaker decides to give a shit again, he's like, all right, like, move your asses. Like, once again, tough love, getting those kids out on the field, even though they've decided to disband the team.
Get your gear on and get your fat ass behind the plate before I kick it up there.
The rest of you pansy-ass quitters, move your asses before I kick them all up there.
And you've got the perfect antagonist for him in the form of Vic Morrow, yet another coach who's taken the sport way too goddamn seriously. But what it reminds me of my early days of playing soccer as a little kid. I was part of the House of Pizza Pirates in Greensboro, North Carolina, and House of Pizza was this crummy little pizza joint on Battleground. But the coach was so psycho about soccer, and his son was on the team. I remember when he would start taking the sport too seriously, and his son made a mistake, he would walk over to his child, grab the skin over his Adam's apple, and he would shake it back and forth while screaming at his son, who would be crying. "Ah!" But when I watched the Bad News Bears, I'm like, oh my God, like, both coaches are acting just like my coach from the fucking House of Pizza Pirates.
At center field.
What the hell is the matter with you? You don't swing at a 3-0 pitch. Are you crazy swinging at a 3-0 pitch? Now get in there. Never do that again. Shut up. I don't want to hear any excuses. Get in there.
But I think one of the main reasons this movie's enjoyed such longevity and such a long shelf life is that they're willing to let Walter Matthau's character be a total son of a bitch. Like when he tells Jackie Earle Haley, basically, I want you out there basically like hogging the ball from all your teammates because we just need to win. But he's basically dividing the team and turning them against each other. Or when he's telling players that suck at baseball to basically lean into the pitch and just like take the hit in the shoulder so they get the easy walk. But he basically starts like abusing these kids and screaming at them and berating them and like shoving them around.
The first inside pitch you get, lean into it, let it hit you.
But I only...
You want to win the game, don't you?
Well, I don't want to get hurt.
All right, but you want to win the game.
Yeah.
And at one point, when one of the players tells him that Tatum O'Neal's character, like her arm's shot and she needs to be taken out of the game, when Walter Matthau refuses, there's this great reaction shot where the kid's like, are you shitting me? Like, are you really taking this so fucking seriously? But because these scenes are so dark and so disturbing, once again, I'm talking about a kid's movie, but because these scenes are so kind of unsettling in a lot of ways, it makes the happy ending all the more powerful. And there's this great turning point in the movie where we see Vic Morrow's character taking the game way too seriously as well and shoving his son to the ground. And his son has this great protest where he holds the ball on purpose and allows the Bad News Bears to score a few runs. And around that time, we finally start to see that Buttermaker's having his great revelation that he needs to just relax and encourage every kid to play. Every kid is going to get a little chance on the field to do their best, irrespective of the outcome.
Aside from Timmy Lupus, I'm probably the worst player in this league.
If you do me a favor, Ogilvy, just shut up and get up to the plate and try to hit the ball.
But probably the most heartwarming moment in the entire movie, given what we came before with Tatum O'Neal. And I'm getting goosebumps and I'm about to start crying even thinking about it.
Maybe next spring you teach me how to hit.
You bet, Lizzie.
But it's like he never says I'm sorry for throwing a beer in her face and like being a total psycho and being a total prick to her and basically ignoring her for years until he needed her for the team. But there's something about that moment where he says, you bet, where you realize all's been forgiven, maybe not forgotten, but all's been forgiven, and that they will remain, pals in the years to come. And what's amazing is how Tatum O'Neal very nearly didn't play this role. Initially, the role was offered to Jodie Foster, but she went off and did this little-known movie called Taxi Driver, which I also did a 50th anniversary review for a few weeks ago. But I feel like Tatum O'Neal was born to play this role, and she's incredible in Paper Moon, working with her father, Ryan O'Neal. It's a great movie, but I prefer her in The Bad News Bears just because she talks so much shit. When she first joins the team, and Tanner is reacting in protest, and he says, we have this on the team, and this on the team, and this on the team, and now a girl. And she's like, grab a bat, punk.
Grab a bat, punk.
she's clearly one of those classic tomboys who can give as good as she gets in a predominantly male environment, which leads to some really interesting scenes between her and Jackie Earle Haley, who's like the ultimate bad boy in this. He rides a little motor scooter or a little baby motorcycle, and he smokes cigarettes, and he's got a pretty notorious reputation as kind of an outlaw, but also the best athlete in the area. And Jackie Earle Haley, aka Kelly Leak, I think most people, their mind immediately goes to the character of Rorschach in Zack Snyder's Watchmen as soon as his name comes up. But he delivers one hell of a performance in this movie. And I love when people are discussing him on the field. One of these Spanish-speaking players is like, es un bandito, and the way he says it just makes me absolutely howl with laughter. It's one of his only lines in the movie. He's calling him a bandit.
That dude is a bad mother. He's talking about a loan shark. I borrowed a nickel from him last week. He said if I didn't give him a dime by Friday, he'd break my arm.
Es un bandido.
But Tatum O'Neal is recruited to bring him onto the team, to be the bait, and she decides to show up where he operates by playing him in air hockey, where if he loses, he has to join the team, but if she loses, she has to go on a date, and which leads to all these great conversations about this Rolling Stones concert she's going to have to go to, where Walter Matthau's asking, like, well, what if he tries something? And
what if he tries something,
I'll handle it.
So it's absolutely hilarious stuff. Because ultimately, she fails in her attempt to recruit him onto the team, but as Vic Morrow, who acts like such a prick to Jackie Earle Haley, he decides he is going to join the team, just as a way of kind of getting a little revenge when he says, like, some asshole changed my mind. But when he arrives to join the team, it's this great scene where Walter Matthau's announced to the team that they all need to wear cups and supporters for all the games.
Cups and supporters. Gotta be worn at all times.
No fair.
Comfortable.
Well, either you wear them, either you wear them or you don't play.
But once again, it's just one of those outrageous scenes that you would never see in the 2020s, but it's not like a scandalous scene. It's not a depraved scene. It's not an offensive scene. It just requires the courage on the part of the filmmakers to depict that scene in an honest way and to find the comedy.
Anyway, it's too small.
If she doesn't wear one, neither do I.
And then it leads into some incredible athletics, because as we see, Jackie Earle Haley, he actually does have some talent. Like that first pitch by Tatum O'Neal, he just catches it. It's like a little harder, and she's like, who does he think he is? Like Mickey Mantle? I love all that shit.
Little harder, huh?
Who does this turkey think he is? Mickey Mantle?
Rifle one.
But we also get some heartbreaking scenes where we see the team turning against him because Walter Matthau's told him to be a ball hog, but eventually all is forgiven, where Tanner, huge surprise, decides to get in a fight with the entire opposing team, and Jackie Earle Haley steps in to help him out. Or I should call him Kelly, that's the name of his character in the movie. But they have this great bonding moment where, as they're walking away, Tanner's like, you know what, I could have taken them all myself, like I didn't need your help.
I didn't need your help,
I know.
Could have taken all those guys myself.
Yeah.
But it's one of those great moments that perfectly captures the way kids behave, where no one's going to say, I'm sorry, or you're forgiven, or whatever the case may be. But you know that Tanner and Kelly Leak, they've had a reconciliation. Therefore, Kelly's going to have a reconciliation with the rest of the team. He's back. He's part of the wolf pack again. And that's why I keep coming back to the fact that this movie feels so gritty, raw, and authentic. Because when you're a kid, you're constantly having fights with your friends and kind of falling out of favor and becoming friends again. But the moments where you become friends again, it's not like you have like these big dramatic moments where, like, I'm sorry I behaved in an inappropriate fashion. Oh, you're forgiven, blah, blah, blah. You're just like, hey, you want to play Nintendo? And like, yeah, sure. And suddenly you realize that you're friends again, even though nothing really had to be stated outright. But the best reconciliation by far in this movie is the reconciliation between Lupus and Tanner. We can't wrap up this video without discussing the mighty Lupus, because Lupus might have the most triumphant, inspirational moment in the history of sports in movies, where, I mean, this kid, he could not hit the broadside of a barn with a baseball if you asked him to. He's uncoordinated, he's small, he's shy, he doesn't talk, he is not an athlete, and yet, whether it was by accident or by design, he does manage to catch a ball that's very nearly a home run at the end of the movie, and it's so triumphant, it makes my spirit soar. But early on in the movie, he's still very much inside of his shell, and Tanner doesn't like him all that much. He says, like, boy, does that booger-eating spaz make me want to puke. The fact that he calls him a booger-eating spaz, and he very well might be a booger-eating spaz, but yeah, Tanner, he just he says it how it is.
Lupus.
Lupus.
God, does that booger-eating spaz make me want to puke?
but it's one of those things where it's a little bit like a sibling rivalry, where you might talk shit to your siblings, but if somebody else outside the family talks shit to your sibling, then you're immediately back on the same side again. And the same holds true with this team, where some kids are picking on Lupus and they're pouring ketchup on his hair and putting his hat on him, and Tanner just goes fucking berserk in his eyes. Even if he dies in the attempt, he's going to stand up for Lupus and throw down with these kids. And after Tanner basically gets his ass kicked again by these bigger, older kids, he tells Lupus, look, you got to learn to stand up for yourself. And by the very end of the movie, you see that Lupus has learned to stand up for himself.
And another thing, just wait till next year.
Because at the very end of the movie, after the team's crushed a few beers, he talks a little smack to the opposing team, and Walter Matthau, Buttermaker, looks at him in surprise and delight, which leads to that classic shot in black and white of the entire team. I mean, the Bad News Bears are the greatest team in the history of sports and movies. I just love all those characters to pieces. It's one of those movies where I could watch it probably once a week the rest of my life, and I would never get tired of watching it, especially if I had some other people to watch it with who had never seen it before. I feel like it's my duty in life, and that I spent so many decades ignoring the movie and neglecting the movie, that now that I've kind of like seen the light and had my come to Jesus moment, I need to tell as many people as humanly possible that, you know, a strong contender for the best sports movie ever made is The Bad News Bears. And there are a lot of other good ones out there, like Slapshot is another one of those quintessential movies from the 70s about sports, where when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, like, well, how have we lost so much culturally where people are unable to make sports movies like this? Because I feel like the big trap of a lot of sports movies, they fall into this kind of sentimental garbage where it's all about, you know, or I should say, it's exclusively about team spirit, and it's like, you know, it's kind of generic and it's predictable and it kind of hits certain beats. But I feel like if you want to make a great sports movie, it has to be about more than just sports. It's got to have great character beats, it's got to have great comedy. And it just needs to come across as being gritty and authentic and honest and pure. And it's hard to think of a movie that's more honest and pure than The Bad News Bears. And everybody involved knew precisely what movie they were making, and they just absolutely knocked it out of the park. I use that expression too much when discussing other movies, but when it comes to a movie about baseball, it's absolutely appropriate. They knocked it out of the park. It's a Hall of Fame classic, and it was just an absolute pleasure and delight celebrating the movie's greatness here today on this channel. So at the risk of stating the obvious, if you've never seen The Bad News Bears and you're still with me at this point, definitely check out the movie, but also don't neglect some of Michael Ritchie's other great movies like Downhill Racer, Prime Cut. Prime Cut's really fucking good. Semi-Tough, Smile, Fletch. I mean, all these movies are just fantastic. And it's funny how Michael Ritchie, perhaps because as a director, he doesn't have a strong, distinctive visual style, I never think of him as one of the directors that I really admire. But if you've seen more than 10 movies by a director, clearly they're doing something right, where you really respond to the work. But there are some directors who are kind of invisible behind the camera, but create a giant filmography. And there are other directors where it's like you can look at one frame of film and say, oh, it was shot by so-and-so. It's a movie directed by so-and-so. Michael Ritchie's not one of those guys, but if you put together a giant filmography with a lot of great movies, well then that's what filmmaking is all about. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. I eagerly look forward to reading the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell. I would greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.